Welcome to Boring Classic Literature. Classic poems and stories to help you nod off to sleep or just to listen to and relax and unwind from the busy day. Miseries of Fishing by Richard Penn, 1863. Number 1. Feeling rather unsteady whilst you are walking on a windy day over an old footbridge and having occasion to regret the decayed state of the handrail, which once protected the passing fisherman. 2. Suddenly putting up your hand to save your hat in a high wind and grasping a number of artificial flies which you had pinned around it, without any intention of taking hold of more than one at a time. 3. Leading a large fish downstream and arriving at a ditch, the width of which is evident, although the depth of it may be a matter of some doubt, having thus to decide very quickly whether you will lose the fish and half your tackle, or run the risk of going up to your neck in mud. Perhaps both. 4. Making a great improvement in a receipt which a friend had given you for staining gut, and finding that you have produced exactly the color which you wanted, but that the dye has made all your bottoms quite rotten. 5. Fishing for the first time with flies of your own making and finding that they are quite as good as any which you can buy, except that the hooks are not so firmly tied to the gut. 6. Taking out with you as your aide-de-camp an unsophisticated lad from the neighboring village who laughs at you when you miss hooking a fish, rising at a fly, and says with a grin, "You can't fasten 'em, as my father does." 7. Making the very throw which you feel sure will at last enable you to reach a fish that is rising at some distance, and seeing the upper half of your rod go into the middle of the river, when you have towed it ashore, finding that it has broken off close to the ferrule, which is immovably fixed in the lower half of your rod. 8. Feeling the first cold drop giving notice to your great toe that in less than 2 minutes your boot will be full of water. 9. Going out on a morning so fine that no man would think of taking his waterproof cloak with him, and then before 2 o'clock being thoroughly wet through by an unexpected shower. 10. When you cannot catch any fish, being told by your attendant of the excellent sport which your predecessor had on the same spot only a few days before. 11. Having brought with you from town a large assortment of expensive artificial flies, and being told on showing them to an experienced native that none of them are of any use here. 12. After trying in vain to reach a trout which is rising on the opposite side of the river, at last walking on, and before you have gone 100 yards, looking back and seeing a more skillful friend catch him at the first throw. Weight 3 pounds 2 ounces. 13. Having stupidly trodden on the top of your rod, and then finding that the square top which you have brought out with you in the butt belongs to the rod which you have left at home, and will not fit that which you are using. 14. Having steered safely through some very dangerous weeds a fish which you consider to weigh at least 3 pounds, and having brought him safely to the very edge of the bank, then, seeing him when he is all but in the landing net, make a plunge which in a moment renders all your previous skill of no avail, and puts it out of your power to verify the accuracy of your calculations as to his weight. 15. Fishing with the blowing line when the wind is so light that your fly is seldom more than 2 yards from you, or when the wind is so strong that it always carries your fly up into the air before it comes to the spot which you wish it to swim over. 16. Wishing to show off before a young friend whom you have been learnedly instructing in the mysteries of the art, and finding that you cannot catch any fish yourself, whilst he, an inexperienced hand, hooks and lands, by mere accident of course, a very large one. 17. Attempting to walk across the river in a new place without knowing exactly whereabouts certain holes which you have heard of are, probing the bottom in front of you with the handle of your landing net and finding it very soft. 18. Going some distance for 3 days fishing, on the 2 first of which there is bright sunshine and no wind, and then finding that the 3rd, which opens with a southerly wind and a cloudy sky, is the day which a neighboring farmer has fixed upon for washing 200 sheep on the shallow where you expected to have the best sport. 19. Being allowed to have 1 day's fishing in a stream, the windings of which are so many that it would require half a dozen different winds to enable you to fish the greater part of it from the only side to which your leave extends. 20. Finding, on taking your book out of your pocket, that the fly at the end of your line is not the only one by many dozen which you have had in the water, whilst you have been wading rather too deep. 21. Wading half an inch deeper than the tops of your boots, and finding afterwards that you must carry about with you 4 or 5 quarts in each, or must sit down on the wet grass, whilst your attendant pulls them off in order that you may empty them and try to pull them on again. 22. Jumping out of bed very early every morning during the season of the mayfly to look at a weathercock opposite to your window, and always finding the wind either in the north or east. 23. Having just hooked a heavy fish when you are using the blowing line, and seeing the silk break about 2 feet above your hand, then watching the broken end as it travels quickly through each successive ring till it finally leaves the top of your rod and follows the fish to the bottom of the river. 24. Receiving a very elegant new rod from London, and being told by the most skillful of your brother anglers either that it is so stiff or that it is so pliant that it is not possible for any man to throw a fly properly with it. 25. Being obliged to listen to a long story about the difficulties which one of your friends had to encounter in landing a very fine trout, which has just been placed on the table for dinner, when you have no story of the same sort to tell in return. 26. Hooking a large trout and then turning the handle of your reel the wrong way, thus producing an effect diametrically opposite to that of shortening your line and making the fish more unmanageable than before. 27. Arriving just before sunset at a shallow where the fish are rising beautifully, and finding that they are all about to be immediately driven away by 5 and 20 cows, which are preparing to walk very leisurely across the river in open files. 28. Coming to an ugly ditch in your way across a water meadow late in the day, when you are too tired to jump, and being obliged to walk half a mile in search of a place where you think you can step over it. 29. Flattering yourself that you had brought home the largest fish of the day, and then finding that 2 of your party have each of them caught a trout more than half a pound heavier than yours.